what we have here is a couple of impellers from these early Eska motors that have the water-cooled exhaust. Now, most folks don't even know that these engines have impellers and water cooling systems because they're air-cooled. And they run the engines all day long out of the water because they think it's like a lawnmower and they won't have a problem and don't have to worry about water cooling. These engines actually have a rubber water pump impeller. And this is what happens to an impeller when you run it long periods of time out of the water. It takes the vanes and just flattens them out or tears them off. Now this is a hard to find and expensive impeller when you find it. You can get them new. There's a guy on the internet and he sells on eBay motors under the name Eska Man. He has a store and you can buy these pumps new. We chose to try to find a used one in another motor that we have here, and this is a used pump, but it's a heck of a lot better than the one we're trying to save here. So this pump, unlike a lot of them, is held on with a roll pin that's driven through the entire length of the pump. Most of them just have a floating pin in the shaft, but Eska chose to do it this way. So we're going to get this pump exchanged for this one, and hopefully we'll be able to get some water cooling to this motor. This is the water pump housing that will go over the top of the pump after we get it on the shaft, and we're going to put some lubricant on this pump. Now, one of the things we noticed in taking this pump out is that the pump is not symmetrical and there appears to be a top and a bottom. This with the ridge is the top. So that will go on the shaft, over the top of the shaft. And we will align the hole. And this is just a standard industrial roll pin. It really helps if you have the right size punch. If you don't have the right size punch, what you wind up doing is just flattening the pump out, flattening the pin out.
All right.
You definitely want to put some kind of lubrication on these vanes so that when it starts up, if it starts up dry, and when you're turning it while you're assembling it, you're not scraping the vanes of the pump against a dry surface. Now, this is the water pickup tube, the upstream tube, and there is an O-ring seal in there, and you want to put a little bit of Vaseline. We use Vaseline. You can use grease, but Vaseline is just cleaner and seems to work just as well or better than anything else. So now we've got that. We've got a little lubricant in there, and it's going to go over the top.
Yep.
Now that we've got the pump assembled on the shaft and the cartridge tightened up, we've done all our lubrication here, including some grease on the end of the splines, comes the most difficult part. We're going to try to get all this aligned and up the exhaust tube without losing our patience. Now there is a water tube in there, which is what you see here on this engine, which we've taken apart, and that tube has to go aligned into the top of that cartridge. Not only that, but you have to align this stud and get the splines in the bottom of the crankshaft. All 3 or 4 items have to come together, and it is very, very easy to push that exhaust water pickup tube off to the side and have it totally miss the top of the cartridge. It renders the whole cooling system ineffective. So what we've got to do here is align these three fittings, and it helps if you have a flashlight.
Okay.
Now there are only two fasteners that hold this gear case onto the lower unit, and they are the this stud nut and this Phillips head, this quarter 20 slotted headed screw, which is up inside the exhaust tube. So you have only two fastening points. There are locating pins at both ends, I believe. Definitely at this end and probably at this end also. You have to align those.
It's a FedEx thing.
Oh. And then there's a little cover that goes over the top. That is very often missing. One of the things you want to watch for on these engines is this particular little spring clip, which is almost always missing. And if you find an engine with one of them on it, it's usually a good sign that somebody took enough care when they put it back together again, or that nobody's fooled with the engine, which is an excellent.
I like this one better.
Oh.
Let's use the best of both.
Okay.
So this is how you take it off.
Yeah, you just...
Hold on, let me get your hands in the way there. There, okay. So all this is pretty easy because it's, what is it, a 5 horsepower motor, right?
Yeah.
But if you've got a 60 horsepower motor, all this is more difficult.
Oh, but this doesn't occur on the bigger motors. You have a much different setup. Remember, this engine has has only one set of gears, and the neutral clutch on these engines is done with this disengaging device, which is at the base of the crankshaft. Now, most people think that these engines, just because they're lawnmower engines, will not overheat on an outboard regardless of whether the pump works or not. All the pump really does is cool the base of this engine, because on a lawnmower they take the exhaust, they dump it out into the open air. On this outboard, the exhaust is forced down the drive shaft tube through this manifold. This develops a hot spot. It's like the power head was sitting on top of a red hot oven plate, and that will tend to overheat the engine if the cooling doesn't work. So that's why Eska and other manufacturers of these air-cooled power heads chose to have the exhaust water-cooled. Right here is where it develops the hot spot. This surface right here, the exhaust comes right down on that and then travels down the exhaust leg. This is where it develops the hot spot.